Welcome back to the Tour Today show. My name is Steve Fleck. Every day there is racing at the Tour. We will talk about the highs and the lows, the thrills and the spills, the tragedies and the triumphs at the Tour, aka La Grande Boucle. On each episode of the Tour Today, I have a special guest on the show with me. Today, I'm very pleased to have with me the president of Canyon Bicycles USA, Blair Clark. Welcome, Blair.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
Where exactly in this wacky, wonderful virtual world are you joining us from?
Well, Canyon's located in Carlsbad, California, but my wife and I right now are in Sun Valley, Idaho for just a bit, and I'll be back in Carlsbad in a week. So.
Okay. Is that a recreational property that you own in Sun Valley?
Well, I lived here for a dozen years working for a ski and sunglass company, Smith Optics, before. So.
Oh, very nice. Another great brand, a favorite of mine. I've got a few Smith Optics pieces of eyewear in my collection. Just want to note to the people that are tuning in, Blair, thank you everyone is tuning in to watch the Tour Today show with Steve Fleck. The best place to reach me if you have questions for me, if you have questions for future guests, at Steve Fleck. Blair, if people wanted to find you or find Canyon via social media or online, where can they do that?
B Clark, C-L-A-R-K, at canyon.com is my personal email at the office, and I'm Blair Cycle at Instagram, so
okay,
or on LinkedIn, Blair Clark, etc. So.
Awesome, very good. Well, what a wild and crazy stage 11, Blair. That was about
really fun. I thought it was going to be boring. It was quite fun. Yeah.
Well, you said to me, oh, stage 11 doesn't look that exciting, and look at that finale we had. It was probably the most exciting, finish to a tour stage we've had so far this year. Stage 11. It was a 167 kilometer run from the coastline, Chantilly Plage, on the Atlantic coast, inland to Poitiers. Interesting historical note that the last time the Tour finished in Poitiers was in 1978, and the winner on that day was the great Irish sprinter and all-rounder Sean Kelly, who wore the green jersey a number of times at the Tour de France. But what a crazy finish, Blair. I mean, it was really set up and kind of blown up, and there was some commentary that I saw online on the Flow Bikes coverage I was watching where this might have been pre-set up by Peter Sagan to send Lucas Postelberger from Bora Hansgrohe out on a late attack with about 5 kilometers to go. And that really kind of exploded the sprint trains for the main sprint teams, and all the top sprinters were isolated without lead-out men at that stage.
That made it exciting for sure. And Peter Sagan always makes it exciting in the sprint stages.
Yeah, he certainly did, and it was almost too exciting for Sagan because, unfortunately, fortunately, depending on your perspective, a lot of people have sort of a love-hate relationship with Peter, but he was relegated to excessive contact with Wout van Aert. The 4 riders, Wout van Aert, Peter Sagan, Sam Bennett, and then the stage winner, Caleb Ewan, all came together over the final 50 meters, and it was a pure photo finish between the two of them, probably just a couple of centimeters between the 4 of them. But as you had said, Blair, Sagan always makes it exciting. How do you feel about the relegation? Was that a deserved sort of penalty for him?
I think it was more than fair. I mean, they are charging like racehorses who are leaning their heads with their long necks into one another, and that's what Peter did to Wout van Aert. But Wout, there wasn't quite enough room for Peter to slip by without Peter kind of nudging him with his head to let Wout know, don't close into your right because you'll knock me into the fence. And by doing that, it made Wout move away just enough, and then Peter leaned a little further on him to give him more room to come by. But that wasn't quite enough for the win, though.
I know we all like to look at these things in super slow motion, afterwards, but I think the real way to watch these sprint finishes is in real time because it all happens so quickly. And Neil Rogers, a cycling journalist, I saw a tweet of his just before we came on camera here, and he basically explained it all out. These are very experienced sprinters. They're making instantaneously, almost instinctive decisions in a fraction of a second, and sometimes they're wrong.
Yeah.
And clearly in that instance, Sagan had made the wrong decision, tried to squeeze by between Van Aert and the barricades, and the commissaires and the officials decided that was too much contact and relegated him. So what does that mean? That means that Sagan gets shifted to the back of the main group that came across the finish line. So he will get no points for his finish there, which is significant in the green jersey competition, Blair, because that was something that Sagan was really targeting with this Tour de France. In fact, many were saying that like the green jersey competition was Sagan's for sure, and that there really was no competition, and they might as well just give it to him right away at the start. But he's got a bit of a battle on his hands from here to Paris if he wants to win that jersey, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's over. I don't think he'll win it.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's come from behind before and won it, so we'll just see.
Well, it will be interesting to see because there aren't a lot of like pure sprint stages left between here and the final finish, the classic finish on the Champs-Élysées in Paris. And it's going to be about the intermediary sprints and gathering up points as best as you can along the way. But let's just review that the top finish again on the stage. Again, Caleb Ewan from Lotto Soudal, the winner. Sam Bennett from Dunisac Quick-Step, second. Wout van Aert, as we mentioned, was third. Sagan was originally fourth across the line, but he was relegated. As mentioned, Brian Coquard from the B&B Hotels team, a wildcard team that got in at the last minute, finished fourth. And Coquard's having a great tour. He's been in there in every sprint. As expected, no change on a stage like this with the yellow jersey. Primož Roglic remains in yellow. Egan Bernal in second. And the surprise of the French riding for Cofidis, Guillaume Martin remains in third in the yellow jersey. Big change, as we mentioned, Blair, in the green jersey. Sam Bennett, well, not a change. Sam Bennett retains that jersey, but Sagan lost over 30 points today. He lost those points that he would have won, and then they penalized him some points as well on the final decision of the commissaire. So Sagan sits in second spot now, 175 points. Bennett has 243, and I agree with you. It's going to be tough for Sagan to make those points back. Brian Coquard, on the strength of a number of top 5 and top 10 finishes on the sprints, is in third spot in the green jersey. No change in the white jersey. It's still Egan Bernal in the lead. KOM, no change there, of course. The last two stages completely flat. Benoit Cosnefroy remains in polka dots for AG2R. Now, tomorrow's stage, and pretty much every stage from here on in, Blair, is really, really tough. So I don't know if Benoit Cosnefroy is going to be able to hang on to this. In fact, he might have some competition on his hands from young Mark Hirschi, who had such a great stage in the Pyrenees just a few days ago. Hirschi is lurking just a few points behind. So we'll see how that goes tomorrow. We'll review the stage for tomorrow just momentarily. And here's good news for you, Blair. The Movistar team riding Canyon bikes is currently in first place in the team competition. So good news for Canyon and for Movistar. So the stage, I know we'll get to that in a bit. The stage tomorrow is the longest stage, in the tour, Blair, 218 kilometers. And as we've discussed, it's pretty challenging. It potentially could still be one for the sprinters, but it might be sort of a breakaway that gets away and hides for the whole day. What do you think?
The breaks don't get away very often, in today's technology with radios and directors understanding the power output. They make calculations and can figure out how many riders it might take to drag back a break. So I think it comes down to a sprint again.
Okay. All right. Down to a sprint. One thing in this Tour de France is that I've learned is that every stage has been a little bit different than the predicted outcome. So the one thing that has been consistent is expect the unexpected. So we'll see how it goes tomorrow. Tune in for all the action wherever you're watching. I know in Canada, we're really lucky. We've got the new exclusive deal with Flow Bikes, streaming all the coverage. In the U.S., I know that you've got NBC and NBC Gold with their coverage down there. Okay, let's get to know Blair a little bit better, and Canyon Bikes in particular. I was really pleased to have Blythe Jack, who sits on the board of directors for Canyon, on the show with me a few days ago. Blair, it was a fascinating discussion with her.
She's a wonderfully bright, compassionate, fun, self-deprecating, just great lady in person. She's a terrific asset to the global business. So, and she identified Canyon as the key investor from TSG and brought it in. So.
Nice. Very good. So it's been a crazy year in the bike business. Generally speaking, up, for everyone, in the business. Certain sectors, in the business, a bit more than others. How has this impacted Canyon in particular?
Well, it's been really a terrific ride. It was already a very strong business as a result of being direct to consumer and the technology and the sports marketing that we have with the wonderful list of teams and world champions in a variety of disciplines. But as COVID occurred and we were all trying to analyze, what was the impact going to be, and should we be tightening our belts, or should we expand, we found very quickly that we needed to expand, and that our traffic on our website and our telephone calls to the call center was 4 times the highest peak in 2019. And so we've had a tremendous tailwind all through this spring and summer, and our fiscal year ends at the end of September here, and we're up substantially.
Wow, congratulations. That's amazing. Now, you mentioned the model. It is direct to consumer. Canyon's been, highly successful, in Europe, and it's been about sort of 2 years, in the US for Canyon now fully operational. What have been some of the challenges you've faced, in the US market, and possibly some of the differences between, the European market and what you've seen in the United States?
Well, the bigger brands are more entrenched in the U.S., Trek and Specialized and Giant and Cannondale being the 4 big ones on the roadside. Mm-hmm. And that was more of a formidable threat, at least from our perspective initially, but we've actually grown faster than predicted when we put together the business model for coming to the U.S. In fact, in year 1, we achieved what we had hoped to achieve in year 2, and we're now at the end of our 3rd year. Mm-hmm. So we're quite a bit ahead of our plan, and we're blessed with great product, great sports marketing, a terrific team here at Canyon US. But the greatest blessing is just having a business model that is so disruptive, and where we really embrace the consumer and that relationship to make them feel a part of our family. So, mm-hmm. In terms, you ask, what kind of obstacles and hiccups, our biggest obstacle has been availability. It's really hard to predict exactly which bikes and which models when you have 180 different models and hundreds of different stock keeping units, how many of which you ought to have. And we're equally important in triathlon, in gravity, downhill bikes, in cross country mountain bikes, in enduro mountain bikes, and then in, road racing, the aerodynamic road bikes, the endurance road bikes, and so forth. There's a whole host of different options. And to be perfectly honest, it's a bit of a crystal ball to forecast without having orders in advance from our customer base. We have to forecast out thousands and thousands of bikes to arrive over the course of 12 months. And it's hard not to disappoint people when oftentimes the availability is hard to predict. So.
Indeed, that's challenging. And unlike, certain brands at the level that you're competing with, I'm thinking of a company like, not to bring them into the discussion here, but a brand like Cervelo, for example, that's focused mm-hmm. just almost purely up until recently, sort of mid to high end sort of road bikes. Canyon offers the full range. Road bikes and triathlon. Whereas Canyon, you mentioned the extraordinary range. It's road biking, it's gravel, it's cyclocross, it's mountain bike, it's triathlon. It's all of those. So that's a massive, challenge for you. And you must have to monitor those categories to like see where the growth is. So looking into that data and that information, what categories are like really growing right now?
Well, gravel is up, 70% as an industry, and it's up more than that. We'll have more gravel bikes in our portfolio next year than ever. And, that's a shift, Steve, also of the rider experience, right? I mean, I think a lot of that is driven by the millennials who want to ride a bike for an adventure. Yes. And that's causing them to want to go get on a gravel bike. And it's also from the boomers like you and me who say, hey, I'm tired of doing road races or Grand Fondos. I'd like to try something different. And I want to avoid distracted drivers. And I want to connect a dirt road with a paved road to make some new loops and have fun. And then for the event promoters, it's a lot less expensive to staff and to get police or the land managers to approve a bike race on a dirt road than it is to shut down city streets. So all those things, came together. And it's not unlike the ski industry where in some ways snowboarders and skiers were two different tribes, and then they merged together to be this sort of free ride movement that's in skiing. And that's happening in cycling with road and mountain. But there's more people coming to gravel from the road side of the business than from the mountain side.
And the cool thing that I really like about this, Blair, is that now, and everyone's making, I know you've got a bike, a couple bikes in your line where you can literally just have one bike and with a change of tires, a change of wheels, it's a road bike or it's a gravel bike, however you want to define it. But literally with a change of wheels or tires, you have this tremendous range of terrain you can ride on. You can race in a Grand Fondo. You can go to the Thursday Night Club World Championships. You can ride gravel, even some light trail, kind of use. It's all doable. It's doable with one bike. I love that.
Well, that's what our Grail does for people.
Yeah, the Grail would be the bike in your line that I was kind of thinking of. Now, let's shift over to, you mentioned sort of sports marketing and sports sponsorship, earlier in your comments. Blair, one of the comments that came into social media when I was asking for questions yesterday was, what is the role of sponsorship? And I noted earlier that you sponsor the Movistar team, a team that historically has done very well. It's one of the high profile sort of Spanish teams in the World Tour, and Canyon's also sponsoring Arkea Samsic, and Nairo Quintana is the big star rider there, possibly with a outside shot at possibly winning the Tour. What's the role of sponsorship of teams like that? Is there sort of quantifiable data that you would collect that you can see sort of leading to sales? I mean, the direct-to-consumer model is a little bit different in that there's a whole step eliminated, and I think what the asker was asking was maybe there's a more direct connection for you.
Well, it's a little unfair at times to do the precise ROI on the investment because if you just look at the bike, and let's say there's a model like the Movistar colorway, and you say, how many of those did we sell compared to the investment in the Movistar team? But the reason for the investment in the Movistar team is the collaboration on the product development to take prototypes and get the rider feedback, to put the rider on the bike in a wind tunnel, to get their feedback about how it handles climbing, descending. Because it's one thing to get all the data from a test lab of how the frame flexes torsionally, vertically, and so forth. It's another thing to put it under a pro rider and say, okay, now we've got this prototype, go ride it for us and give us your feedback. And then to aggregate all that information along with reviews from magazines and media. I mean, it's just another data point of validation of the strength of the brand, really, that we can have two teams in the pro tour. So. And
the Canyon even goes beyond that. You sponsor, arguably, and he's not in the tour, probably the one rider who everyone thinks is the all-around best cyclist in the world, and that's something that is open to argument, but I believe so as well. Matthew van der Poel, the world cyclocross champion, world mountain bike champion, has been
prodigy.
dabbling in the road and has done some exciting, things on the road. I think he needs to get on a bit of a better team, but that level of sponsorship, I certainly, see as, being successful. And then there's the women's, and Blythe and I talked about this at length, the things you're doing with the Canyon SRAM, women's team. I love that program that they do where they actually use Zwift to try and find the next rider for the team.
Yeah,
and
they've done that. Yeah.
And they blow it up into a big social media thing. And I mean, everyone watches that. I mean, because you're rooting for that kind of underdog woman who, rider who, has not had a pro contract, or maybe she was in triathlon or something else. But, if she's good enough in the Zwift qualification, she gets a contract from the team to race for a full year.
Well, one of the great things about Roman Arnold, who's the CEO and founder of the business, is that our mission is to inspire riders to ride, and Roman is always looking for the right riders to invest in. Mm-hmm. And whether it's Mathieu van der Poel, who he identified very early on, or the Pro Tour teams, or winning the last, I can't recall now, is it 4 Ironmans in a row? I think we've run Ironman World Championships. And, mountain bike riders galore. Roman really studies the sport and the riders, and really appreciates what they bring. And he's also always looking for the up and coming young riders and the categories that aren't perhaps as strongly endorsed by other major brands. So it's been a treat to work with him and see his passion reflected in where he puts the money.
Well, he certainly has great vision, and every bit of sports marketing that the business and the brand is doing seems to, as you had said, it might not have definitive ROI, but it is coming back to consumers, and they certainly, connect to that and see what's going on. What kind of riding do you like to do? What's your favorite form of riding? What's your favorite bike in the Canyon lineup?
Well, I'm an old roadie, I suppose, but I live, in the mountains part of the time, this summer at least. And right now I'm kind of splitting my time mountain biking and road biking. And on the road bike side, I ride the Evo, which is our top of the line ultimate bike now, called the CFR, which in a size large is 13.1 pounds out of the box without pedals. And it's just an unbelievably fun ride. Wow. And then on the mountain bike side, I ride the Lux, which is a bit of an antelope. It's a cross-country race, dual suspension bike that Mathieu van der Poel rides when he races mountain bikes. And it's also a very than a descender on a mountain bike. So it next model up in our line that's more trail oriented is actually a lot more fun on rugged stuff. So.
Awesome.
But I like all kinds of riding.
Well, and we've got all the bikes to do them in the Canyon stable, and some of the best in the world. So that must be a hard decision for you to make with what bike you're going to ride. You knew you were going to get this question coming from a Canadian, and we've been anxious. We've been anxiously waiting north of the border here for when Canyon bikes would be officially available. I know some people are doing a bit of an end around to get at them, and I think that's a mark of the quality and the demand for them. But when will Canyon bikes officially be available in Canada? I know they did a little bit of a promo and a demo last year at Sea Otter Canada, an event that I sort of emceed, so I had some exposure to them there. But is there sort of an official launch date for Canada coming up, Blair?
There's a plan, and Steve, I have to apologize to the country of Canada, because it was our intention to come this year, and if it weren't for COVID, we might have been able to, but given the demand, it wouldn't have made sense. We wouldn't have had the inventory, and just would have frustrated more people. So next spring, we will go to Canada. So.
Awesome. Well, great news. I'm sure all the Canadians that are listening in and people who want to get a Canyon will be enthusiastic about that. So next spring for that. Final prediction for the Tour de France. Who's going to win this?
Well, Roglic will definitely. I mean, this is, as I mentioned to you in the correspondence on email, this is really a race between two Slovenians. And, whether it's Roglic or Pogačar, you have to be a climber and a fantastic time trialist. And with the time trial at the end of the tour here, actually Roglic is great at both of those disciplines, but so is Pogačar. And Pogačar is by far the best climber in this year's tour. And he beat Roglic in the Slovenian National Time Trial Championships just a few weeks ago by 8 seconds, which is really surprising. So this is also a race about the youth, because there's so many young riders doing so well. This is such a disruption and a surprise. And yet still Alejandro Valverde at 40 years old is still competing on the Movistar team. So it's really going to be fun, but I think there'll be 2 Slovenians on the podium. The question is who will be in, step number 2. And I think Roglic will be on step number 1. So.
I agree with you 100%. I like the mention of the young talent coming up. This Tour de France, I know it's exceptional in terms of the timing for this and the year we've had, but it really is speaking to, I think, a changing of the guard, like across the whole spectrum of riders, from sprinters to climbers to all-rounders. We're seeing young riders coming out, and Tadej Pogačar from Slovenia, as you mentioned, at just 21 years old, has been a bit of a revelation of the Tour. You've been watching the Tour Today show. My guest has been Blair Clark, the president of Canyon Bicycles USA. Blair, thank you so much for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us.
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure.
My guest tomorrow for Stage 12 on the Tour Today show will be Ryan Cooper, the chief scientist at Training Peaks and a co-founder at Best Bike Split. I'm Steve Fleck on behalf of the team at Endurance Zone TV. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you all back here tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time for the next episode of the Tour Today show.